In this video, I'm going to go over how to complete Scientific Inquiry Virtual Lab. If you have already downloaded the PDF version of this document, you can simply type your answers right in there, or you can write your answers in a Word document, or you can download this version that I'm using from Google Docs. In order to download this version, you click on File, Download, and then Microsoft Word. This would allow you to have your own copy so that you can edit it and submit it for credit. Let's get started. Question number 1, you're developing a hypothesis. So in this experiment, we'll investigate the question, how does changing temperature affect volume? You're going to write the answer to the question that can be tested. So for example, when the temperature goes up, the volume will blank. So you fill in the blank for this question. Is it going to increase, decrease, or is it going to stay the same? So those are your three options: increase, decrease, or stay the same. Fill in the blank. What do you think will happen as the temperature increases? Section 2. We're designing the experiment. So for this part, we have to identify our variables. Okay, remember, the independent variable is the variable that I change. The dependent variable is the variable that is being measured. Now, let's read these sentences up top that tell us a little bit about the experiment, and then we can identify these variables. It says, in this experiment, you'll have access to a heater or cooler so that you can change the temperature of the gas. The top that controls the volume must be allowed to move freely so that the pressure is constant and a change in volume can be measured. So, based on these sentences, what is the manipulated variable? What is the independent variable, and how do you know? As I said before, the independent variable is the variable that I change. If you notice in the first sentence, it says access to the heater or cooler so that you can change the temperature. So the temperature is the manipulated variable. Excuse me. Temperature is the independent variable, the variable that is being manipulated. How do you know? Well, that is the variable that is being changed by the person doing the experiment. Next one, the dependent variable. This is the variable that's being measured. So if you look again at the top few sentences, it says, so that the pressure is constant and the change in volume can be measured. So what's being measured? We're measuring the volume. How do we know that's the dependent variable? Because that's what's being measured. Part 3, we're collecting and presenting data. So for this part, we're actually doing the experiment. You're going to need access to the gizmo, and here's the link to the gizmo. You also have access to it from your Connexus lesson 1.5. And I'm going to scroll over here so that you guys can see the gizmo, and then I'm going to minimize this so that we can look at the questions. Okay, I'm going to scroll down to the table, my data table over here. All right, so I have my data table, and then on the right here I have my gizmo open. So on the gizmo, if you notice the purple, this is how you're manipulating the temperature. Based on your data table, if you notice, the very first temperature you want to take is 100 degrees Kelvin. So I'm going to type in here 100 degrees Kelvin. And then on the bottom right, you notice it says pressure, volume, and temperature. Make sure the temperature is 100 degrees. And then you're going to collect the volume, which is 0.85. So that's the number I write here where it says volume, 0.85. Okay, after you write down the number, then you're going to go over where it says graph in the top corner here. Click on it, and you're going to hit record. This is going to plot that data point right on a graph for you. Then you can move on to the next point, which is 150 degrees Kelvin. 100 degrees 150 degrees Kelvin. The volume is 1.27. 1.27. And again, you're going to hit record so you can plot that point. I'll do one more for you and then I'll let you do the rest. So this one is 200 degrees Kelvin. 200 degrees Kelvin. 1.7 is the volume, so I type in my data table 1.7 and then I hit record, so that way the graph plots that point. After you've done 250, 300, 350, and 400, you're going to hit the top corner here where you see the camera icon. You're going to click on that and it's going to take a screenshot of your graph. The screenshot of your graph is going to pop up on the screen just how it did for me, and you're going to do a right click and then you're going to do save image or copy image. After you copy the image, go over to your document where you're collecting your answers and you're going to right click and then you're going to paste. Right? This will paste the image right onto your document. You resize it as you need. And then you can move on answering the rest of the questions. So for section 4, it says here, what can you say about the relationship between the temperature and volume? Be specific. This question is asking you to say, as the temperature increases, what's happening to the volume, right? Is it increasing? Is it decreasing? Is it staying the same? And then tell me, how do you know? How can you tell based on your data? Okay, so that's what you're doing for question number 1. Question number 2. What will be an approximate volume when the temperature is 1000 degrees Kelvin? Explain your answer. Now, you can try to graph that on your gizmo, but it doesn't go up to 1000. So, based on your experiment and what you have already done, what do you think it will be at 1000? And then say, why do you think so? Section 5. Write a short summary describing the process of scientific inquiry in this lab. In order to write a short summary, the easier way to do it is to scroll back up to the beginning, right? And then you see the Roman numerals, they tell you exactly what you did. So you're just going to copy that down. Step 1, develop that hypothesis. We made an educated guess as to what would happen. Part 2. We designed an experiment. We identified the dependent and dependent variable. Part 3, we collected and presented data. So we actually did the experiment. And then we did a graph and we did a table. Part 4, interpret your data. So tell me, what does the data mean? Was our hypothesis correct or not? Analyzing. And then part number 5, we draw conclusions. So that's all you're writing for question number 1, pretty much summarizing each and every one of those 5 steps. Question number 2, discuss any possible errors that may have occurred while conducting this experiment. So what are some errors that you think might have occurred? And then the last question, number 3. A conclusion states whether the data supports the hypothesis. So review your hypothesis and draw a conclusion, right? So tell me, was your hypothesis correct or not? If you guessed correctly, right, you would say the experiment supports my hypothesis because as temperature increases, then volume increases, or whatever your hypothesis was. If your hypothesis was wrong, you're going to say the experiment, after conducting this experiment, my hypothesis is rejected because, and then you tell me why. All right, so that's all you're doing for the last question here. And this is all for this portfolio. So once you're done answering these questions, make sure to save your document and then submit it to the Dropbox so you can get proper credit. If you have questions, please reach out to me and I'll be glad to help.